Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
My name is still Donna, and I'm still an alcoholic from Columbus, Ohio. I'd like to welcome all of you to the opening ceremonies of the 12th Annual Central Office Intergroup Seminar. I'm not nervous. Before we get into anything else like the welcoming from the locals here, I'd like to recognize all the newcomers that are here for their very, very first seminar. And I know there are some of you out there. Don't be afraid. Please. That is grand. I'm going to tell you, if you don't, here's something to take back home this weekend. You have not been listening, right, Dick? Now, I'm going to turn the rest of this over for a few minutes to the welcoming committee, and we're going to go right from left to right, and that way we won't have any problems. George, you're on next. I'd like to introduce our Area 53 delegate, Bill Farley, from Marietta, Ohio.
Whoa.
Told you I wasn't nervous.
That's all right.
Is anything like a good entrance?
There we
Thank you. We know where we're at.
There we are. Okay, got it? All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Farnsworth, alcoholic, delegate, Area 53, Panel 47. Hi, everybody. I heard Donna mention that we were locals, and I live in Marietta, Ohio, and it's 125 miles from here. And I was here about an hour, but I left 2 hours early to get here from Sunbury Drive, which is probably a few minutes from here, and I got lost. So then I was stuck in the traffic, and I stopped and got something to eat, and I came here and made my first stop to the hospitality room to visit there, that's always, I travel a lot, and I'm gone quite a few weekends, so I really count on those hospitality rooms when I go to a convention, and it makes me feel like I'm at home, because I like to sit in front of the TV and eat some snacks, but that's usually television. I miss all the hit programs because I'm usually at a meeting every evening, so I do get home to watch Seinfeld and always enjoy that. And I'm really excited. And I want to tell you, I don't have a concern for anybody coming here from out of state and getting in trouble here in Columbus, because I know people here aren't drinking. And so if I had been drinking and traveling here, I'd already be in trouble, because once I took a drink, I headed downtown. So it's good you all came, and I want to welcome you. I had my first introduction to Intergroup Central Office when I was sober about 2 years, and I lived near Dayton in Yellow Springs. And the old-timers in the group made me the intergroup representative, and I was very grateful to be able to serve for 2 years with the Dayton area intergroup. But something that even touches me closer than that is 2 years before that, I was in the Greene County Home, and it's in Ohio. They have a home system for people that are homeless or alcoholic or have mental disabilities such as mental illness or mental retardation. And I was confined to the county home because I was an alcoholic and because I was homeless. And a fellow used to drive out every weekend. I was in the alcoholic ward there, and a fellow from the Dayton area intergroup used to drive out on Saturdays and Sundays and talk to us about the 12 steps. So the local intergroup touched me from the very beginning, and I was able to, I was very impressed. It made a lifelong impression on me that our business is really helping other alcoholics, carrying the message from one alcoholic to another. And Bob touched me by trying. I couldn't figure out why anybody would drive 30 miles to go out and to see an alcoholic in the county home. And Bob came out on Saturdays and Sundays, and I was there in the winter, and it was right in the middle of football season, and that really made an impression on me because I had never left the TV set and my cold beer to visit anybody. And that touched me, and I still think about that. And I thought about that, and I've got my notes here for my talk. right here. and not because I don't respect you, but I happened to come over, and thanks to the wonders of modern technology, I have a cell phone. So I was driving over here, and I called my sponsor because I was doing a 10-step inventory, and I do that in writing every day. And so I was driving and writing my 10-step inventory at the same time, and I called my sponsor on my cell phone. You know, I don't have an excuse in the world today to contact him. And he told me to come up here. His name's Humble Homer, and I said, and he goes by the other name of David. And I said, Dave, I don't know what to say when I get up there. And I read Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age and looked in there, and it describes the intergroups and central offices as vital. And there's no question in my mind about it. But he told me to come up here and talk from my heart instead of making an impressive speech. And I'm considered myself a pretty learned man. And the only thing I can say is that it's touched me. And you folks are the folks that are on the front lines. You know, it says in the big book, keep on the firing line of life. And you're the folks that do exactly that, answering the phones. And every month I get a newsletter from Central Ohio Group Fellowship, and as delegate, I count on that for a lot of my news. Where to be, what are the group functions, what's going on. And also, I know that many intergroups, probably all intergroups, have committees that carry the message to our prisons, to the hospitals, to people that are shut in. And in our area, we have an intergroup, and our intergroup just doesn't have a lot of money, so I know you guys struggle to make ends meet most of the time. Because sometimes, and we're finding out today, when the basket passes, people forget about how they get here. And that touched me as well, because you folks provide a very vital service, just as it says in Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. And there are people out there in our small home group, the 2-for-1 group, which I think is one of the best groups in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we count on you folks every day. And part of our support to our local intergroup is making sure we contribute monthly, because we know how important you are. And we know you're the folks that are answering those telephones and printing out the newsletters that gets the word out to us. And I happen to have contact with a lot of people, and I answer those calls as well because they're referred to me. And today, a lot of groups and a lot of people and a lot of our members of our groups come to Alcoholics Anonymous as a result of those calls to the answering service. So you not only get calls from alcoholics, but our local intergroup gets calls with people of all sort of problems. And today in West Virginia, where telephones are deregulating, what used to be a dime call, a quarter call, is now going to be a little bit more, they tell us. But I know people are still going to keep calling. And I think about something about our newsletter. I pack my local newsletter. I have a little book bag, and I work at a school. And along with my grapevine, I pack the local newsletter. And that provides some good reading, you know, part of the day when I'm having one of those moments, you know, like, you know, maybe I want to strangle somebody or something, you know, or, you know, and I'm saying throughout the day as much as I can, thy will be done. But I grab that newsletter in my grapevine, and that helps me to get through the day. And that means a lot to me. And I was thinking, too, on this thing of finances, and I hope that people continue to support and even support more financially our local intergroups and central offices, because it's needed. And I was reading in the AA Comes of Age, they talk in there about the first intergroup came about in Chicago in 1941, and I wasn't even born then, but people were organizing to try to help alcoholics to find sobriety. And that's what it all is all about. And I want to thank all of you for coming. And I'm grateful. And I know this weekend I'm going to learn something, because how we can help each other is to communicate. And I'd like to find out what you guys are doing to help carry the message. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, don't forget your notes. This is yours, Steve. Next, I'd like to introduce our immediate past delegate, and I'm not going to go into a dissertation about him, but I beg your pardon.
You better not.
He's threatening me, guys. But this gentleman has been right along beside me down through the years when I've tried and put bids in, and he knew how happy I was when I got it to bring you people here. So I give you Bill Schmertz, our immediate past delegate.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Schmertz, an alcoholic. And I'm also the past delegate, Area 53, Panel 45. And first thing, I wanted to welcome you all to bright, sunshiny, warm Central Ohio. Okay, but it's better than Cleveland. So it's better than Cleveland right now, weather-wise. It'll be warm and there's our delegate from Area 54, Cleveland, sitting over there. So it'll be warm and sunshiny in these rooms this weekend for you, though. That'll be nice. Couple things. I wanted to welcome you all here to Columbus. Wanted to welcome our friends from the General Service Office in New York here, and I see some familiar faces out there, and I'm glad to see them after a year and a half. And I wanted to congratulate Donna for finally getting the bid and having all you folks here, and I know she worked real hard for it, and she's thrilled to death to have you all here along with Central Ohio Group Fellowship. So that's terrific. Thank you for coming. I think the other thing that I'm thrilled about is that Donna had three of us from the Area 53 General Service up here to welcome you, and I was thinking how nice that was. But the truth of the matter is that we work well together, and we like each other, and it's the same old thing. It could be that our main central office intergroup could do their own job all by themselves and not get involved or cooperate with Area 53, and vice versa. But we don't do that here, and I think we get the message carried better to that still suffering alcoholic when we do cooperate, when that legacy of service is working, and we're not stumbling over each other and duplicating our efforts. And I think the message gets carried better when we cooperate with each other and really try our darndest to get that message carried. And that is the bottom line while we're all here, actually. To experience, as Bill mentioned, how vital our services are. I'm certainly not going to go and expound on what I think how vital these services are, but I will tell you how important they were to me and are to me. Bill mentioned a little bit about his experiences, but on December 16th, 1980, a little late on a Tuesday morning, I woke up and I had to make a phone call because I couldn't do it alone any longer. And I called Central Ohio Group Fellowship and asked for a meeting. And I don't remember who answered the phone. I don't care. But they gave me the name of a meeting to go to. Somebody was there on the phone, bottom line. And I'm forever grateful for that. The second experience was another bottom that I hit, and I call this my emotional bottom. And that was about 2.5 years later. And I wasn't working a very good program, and it showed, and I was just losing it. I had a bad day at work, and I had to make a decision. I was literally going to go out and get drunk, or I was going to seek some help from someone. And I got into my car, and I got to central office, and I sat down next to this woman, a volunteer who was working right across the table from Donna. And her name was Thoris. And she let me talk to her for a couple hours, and I rambled on, and I babbled and told her how sorry my story was. And she sat there and she nodded. You've all heard it before, you've all heard it. And she sat there and nodded her head. Then she started asking me some questions. And you all know what the questions are. How many meetings do you get into? Do you have a sponsor? You're reading the literature? Do you have a home group? And my answer to all of those was no. And she scared the hell out of me. And she says, "What are you going to do about it?" And I said, I'm going to leave here, and I'm going to go to a meeting, and I'm going to try to go to as many meetings as I can and join AA for the first time in 2.5 years. And that's exactly what I did. Well, I came back the following Tuesday to thank her because I felt better. I got to meetings all through the weekend, and I walked into central office, and Donna was sitting across the table. And I walked in, and I said, "Where's Thoris?" I said, "I need to thank her for being there and helping me out." Donna got up, and she came over to me, and she put her arms around me, and she said, "Thoris died over the weekend." And here was a woman that had emphysema and very bad heart problems, and literally was sick enough to be dying at the time, but still showing up at central office to help out drunks in trouble like me. And that's how important, your services are to someone like me. I'm very grateful for that. She was the living example on how to do service work, and she showed me how to do it. And she also gave me another thing, too. If she could do it, I had no reason at all not to do it. I mean, if she came to central office sick and dying, what excuse did I have? And luckily and fortunately, and I'm real grateful for, is that, I had the time, and I had people to guide me, sometimes lovingly, sometimes not. But I proceeded in my service work, even to this very day, and I'm real grateful to those two instances.
She's nervous. I would now like to introduce the chairman of our Area 53 General Service, Randy Ford, and I love him dearly.
My name's Randy Ford. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. Certainly grateful to be here today. Pleasure to be here. I have the privilege to serve as the chairman for Area 53 General Service Panel 47, and anything that I'm able to do in service is really, really a privilege. I'd like to welcome everybody here. It is, like Bill said, very nice to be a part of this, especially on the welcoming side. One of the things that really we're trying to focus on is the relationships between the area and the intergroup, and how we can join together in unity, and how we can cooperate, and so that we can better serve the people that we're trying to serve, and that's really what it's all about, I think. As Bill said, it is a nice looking bunch of people. When he was sharing his story about coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was thinking of my own, and I remember sometime about August 1979, going into our old central office, and that was really a turning point in my life, and just over the years becoming familiar with how things work, being able to serve on the board and serve as a representative, and had a lot of real hot topics, and I remember some of them, and all of this is about the recovery and about unity and about service, and that's really the three legacies. And when I was looking at the program and the content of what's going to happen, has already happened, and will happen the rest of the week, and it's absolutely fabulous. And I say that because we have a lot of information about intergroups, about some of the problems and some of the difficulties, and also about area general service, and about some of the problems and difficulties and solutions, and about how we can work together. And that really is something that I think is the kind of the heartbeat of what this is about for me. We're trying to serve the same community, trying to do the same thing. We do it a little bit differently. We have little different functions, but the core is the same thing. There's an alcoholic out there this evening that's making a phone call in every state in the United States, and probably everywhere in the world, who needs some help, like I was and like you were, and they're going to be calling the central office. And on the general service side, there's the alcoholic yet to come, possibly stumbling into darkness, who's going to need this thing. And so together we can do this in the spirit of recovery, unity, and service. And I God bless you and welcome you to Columbus. Thank you.
Thank all of you. And you see how much support we have here in Columbus. It's been fantastic. And I thank you for being here to support us, too. I guess, George, you can come up here, and I'd like to open this, because we're going to start with a presentation now, formally from Alcoholics Anonymous General Service. If we can... Oh, Pat. I'm sorry. I'm not nervous. Yeah, you can sit there, darling. I'm sorry. Helen, why can't I be perfect? I'll feel better. Helen keeps telling me I'm going to feel better about 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon. I'd like to introduce the chairman of our Central Ohio Group Fellowship Advisory Board. And most of you that went to Akron yesterday know who she is without much introduction whatsoever. I will give you Pat.
Hi, my name is Pat, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'll tell you what, I'm one happy camper to be here this evening and see all of you here. That's for sure. And I'm just so excited. You know, when I was doing the registration, putting all your names in the computer, and I kept seeing all these different states and all these different intergroups. I mean, I was just overcome. And then we went and decided we was going to invite our the Spanish-speaking intergroups, you know. And so I went and typed out all these addresses by hand, and we got one reply. And I just think it's so neat that we have one of our Spanish-speaking intergroups here tonight. I just think that's so wonderful. You know, and the trip up to Akron and get to know you guys just a little bit better, that was so wonderful. You know, you guys kept thanking me for the trip, you know, and I was the one that got blessed, you know, because I got to meet all of you and talk to you on the bus and everything. And, you know, I cut my teeth at Central Office, and my service started at Central Office, sitting next to this lady right here. And I'll be forever grateful for that, because what I seen in that office was unconditional love. You know, always there, you know, whenever any drunk ever needed her or anybody else in that office. And you know what was really so neat about all of that is when I come to your offices, no matter where I've been across this country, and the first place I like to visit is the Intergroup office, okay? And I'll walk into that office, and the volunteers there, the co-secretary, whoever's working there, the managers, they're always there, and they're always willing to answer my questions, and they're always smiling. And you just make me feel loved no matter where I go. And the Intergroup office, you know, Bill Wilson said, you are what makes AA tick, you know. And I truly believe that to the bottom of my heart. That's why it's always been a pleasure for me to be part of the service of the Intergroup office. You know, and I can't do enough because you guys gave me my life. You know, I learned about humility and everything else at the Intergroup office. You know, like, just for being on the board, I know you guys don't make the greatest pay. Most of you don't make the greatest benefits, you know, and that stuff. And I remember one time at the office, it was really hectic. You know those days. Everything could possibly go wrong was going wrong, you know. And Donna looked like she was about ready to pull her hair out, you know. And I looked at her and I said, why did you do this, Donna? And she'll get mad if she knew what I was going to say. But she looked at me and she said, it's for the rewards. You know, and what she was telling me was there had been a little girl that had been coming there, and she had gotten in some trouble, and she just had all these problems going on in her life, and she had been sharing with people in the office, you know. And they had given her some advice, Donna and the rest of them, and with that advice she took it back. And she got out of a great big jam with the legal system and everything else. And she came in carrying roses to Donna. You know, that was Donna's reward. You know, and I know that's your reward too. And I'm going to get all emotional if I keep on talking. But I love you guys. I'm so glad you're here this week. Thank you.
Now, have I forgotten anything? In a minute, George, in a minute. I would like to start the rest of this meeting with the Serenity prayer, if we could, please. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Now, I have asked a very close confidant. She has guided me for years. She's always been there for me whenever I had any problems with Central Office, how to bid the seminar and all that good stuff. Helen from Atlanta is going to share with us the 12 concepts, which is all about unity. Please.
My name is Helen. I am an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. The 12 concepts, short form. 1. Final responsibility and ultimate authority for AA World Services should always reside in the collective conscience of our whole fellowship. 2. The General Service Conference of AA has become, for nearly every practical purpose, the active voice and the effective conscience of our whole society in its world affairs. 3. To ensure effective leadership, we should endow each element of AA, the conference, the General Service Board, and the service corporations, staffs, committees, and executives with a traditional right of decision. 4. At all responsible levels, we ought to maintain a traditional right of participation, allowing a voting representation in reasonable proportion to the responsibility that each must discharge. 5. Throughout our structure, a traditional right of appeal ought to prevail so that minority opinion will be heard and personal grievances receive careful consideration. 6. The conference recognizes that a chief initiative and active responsibility in most World Service matters should be exercised by the trustee members of the conference acting as the General Service Board. 7. The charter and bylaws of the General Service Board are legal instruments empowering the trustees to manage and conduct World Service affairs. The conference charter is not a legal document. It relies upon tradition and the AA purse for final effectiveness. 8. The trustees are the principal planners and administrators of overall policy and finance. They have custodial oversight of the separately incorporated and constantly active services, exercising this through their ability to elect all the directors of these entities. 9. Good service leadership at all levels is indispensable for our future functioning and safety. Primary World Service leadership, once exercised by the founders, must necessarily be assumed by the trustees. 10. Every service responsibility should be matched by an equal service authority, with the scope of such authority well defined. 11. The trustees should always have the best possible committees, corporate service directors, executive staffs, and consultants. Composition, qualifications, induction procedures, and rights and duties will always be matters of serious concern. 12. The conference shall observe the spirit of AA tradition, taking care that it never becomes the seat of perilous wealth or power, that sufficient operating funds and reserve be its prudent financial principle, that it place none of its members in a position of unqualified authority over others, that it reach all important decisions by discussion, vote, and whenever possible by substantial unanimity, that its actions never be personally punitive nor an incitement to public controversy, that it never perform acts of government, and that, like the society it serves, it would always remain democratic in thought and action. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. If you gentlemen want to go down so you can enjoy George, that's fine. Don't fall. Don't play a Donna. Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. Oh. bet your inventory's in there. Oh, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of really looking forward to hearing George share with us some dialogue on what you just heard, the 12 concepts, which are the guidelines of unity. Spoke to George earlier. He was talking about doing something in German, and I said, please, George, whatever you do, don't present it to us in German. Without any more from me, I'm going to present George.
Good evening, fellow necessary evils and twisted serpents. I mean trusted servants. If any of you are curious about the reference, read the 12 steps and 12 traditions, where Bill says that in the early days, those of us who drew a salary from AA were pariahs, and even the charitably disposed considered us necessary evils. It's really nice for me to be here in this part of Ohio. My Dorsey ancestors settled in Granville, Ohio in the 19th century and were associated with the university there for several generations. And I was there when I was about 6 or 7 and have vague memories. Please don't say you remember being driven over there in a horse and buggy. But I'm hoping to get over there on Sunday afternoon and see if I can find the old Dorsey homestead, which, as I recall, was sort of near the university. I missed the Intergroup seminar last year, but I've attended every one since I was general manager, and it's a little risky for me because when I'm with people like you who are with central offices and working for AA, I tend to get a little relaxed and informal and even indiscreet. And, you know, there's spies here. There's these delegates, Eddie and Bill and Bob. So I have to try and be a little careful. As those of you who are in Baltimore know, my long journey in Alcoholics Anonymous began when I was bailed out of the L.A. County Jail in 1955, and my car was still impounded because I mixed up with a police car. And I walked to the L.A. Central office and bought the very brand new second edition. I was just a little too late to get the first edition. And I still have that edition of the big book, and it has tear stains, booze stains, pee stains, blood stains, and notes in the margin that I cannot read at all because I like to read the book when I was drunk. So as you'll gather, I didn't find immediate sobriety, but I did have my last drink in 1961, and my first service beyond the group level was in intergroups in L.A. and later in San Francisco Bay Area. I was on their San Francisco Bay Area 12-step call list from 1963 to 1992 when I came to New York, and I'm not one of these days I'm going to be back there, and Bruce assures me that he's got a desk there where I can come in once a week and answer the telephones at the San Francisco Central office, and I'm truly looking forward to that. I'd say that you guys are on the front line, and when doing that kind of work on the front line is a given. You know, we all know that. GSO is some kind of pentagon, but you people are out there. Now, being asked to talk about the concepts is a mixed blessing at best. There was a very wonderful, dear woman who those of us from New York know, Ann McFarland, now has 51 years of sobriety, still puts in her day at the New York Intergroup office, and she was a very early staff member, was there shortly after Bill wrote the concepts. And this story, I've heard it enough, I think there's some truth to it. she had been invited somewhere in the country to speak on the concepts. And she went in to see Bill, and she said, Bill, I've been invited to speak on the concepts. What am I going to do? So Bill assured her that she'd be wonderful. It would be no problem. It was the easiest thing in the world, and he was absolutely confident that she would do a great job. And then as she started to leave the room, he added, and I'm sure glad it's you, not me. My own experience along those lines was in the 60s, I think, not too long after they had been approved by the conference. I attended the Southern California Convention, and Chuck C., who was probably the most best-known speaker in Alcoholics Anonymous, had been asked to speak on the conference, and he had on the concepts at the service meeting, and they had the biggest crowd they'd ever had at a service meeting at that convention because of Chuck, and they all walked out with Chuck C. So, you know, talking on the concepts can be somewhat daunting. Now, it was suggested that I talk about the concepts with whatever relevance they might have to other service structures, such as central offices and intergroups. And in doing so, I recalled that several years ago at the World Service meeting, that's the delegates from all over the world get together, the German World Service meeting delegate asked me what I thought should be put in an article on the concepts, and I gave him considerable detail, you know, just try to draw out the principles and see if you can cite some examples, tie them into the spiritual principles and so forth, and thought nothing more about it. About 3 weeks after I got back to New York, I got a letter from him and said, we would like you to write an article on the concepts for our German 459 equivalent. We would like you to write, and he wrote everything that I had said during our conversation, and then in marvelously German form, he said, you will make the article 3,100 words long. I don't know how he arrived at that. So I wrote this paper, which I will kind of skip through and in and out of, and sent it to Germany, and they did print the whole damn thing. It's very long in their 459. They took 2 issues, and I was very proud of it, and was going to circulate it among the staff at the General Service Office. And then I noticed they had 12 concepts of, I guess, trying to recall my little bit of German from that I studied a long time ago, and by George D. Gesellschaft Führer, General Service Office, New York. And I decided I better not circulate that particular paper. But I tried to make this paper to draw out the principles and to try to describe in a way how these the principles, the spiritual principles and the concepts apply to any service structure, foreign general service structures, because they have different setups than we do. They have different legal situations, and they don't entirely replicate our general service structure. And I think the principles and the concepts apply to any service structure, intergroup or anything else that we try to do collectively on behalf of the groups. So after that very lengthy introduction, I will get to the heart of the matter, or somewhat close to it. In any event, in the late 1950s, Bill realized his years of active participation in AA service were nearing an end. He used to say, the sands in the hourglass are running out. And for me, the sands in the hourglass are running out in terms of this kind of participation after 20-some years in general service. And I'm looking forward to manning that desk in Bruce's office. But Bill felt there was by then a structure in place for AA services that would stand the test of time, and that with occasional changes would meet our needs for the foreseeable future. The conference, which had first met on an experimental basis in 1950, had been accepted by the International Convention in 1955. I think you all know this, but I didn't know whether the Germans knew it. Accepted as the voice and effective conscience for the groups in the United States and Canada. Bill believed that the GSO, the board, General Service Board, the conference, through trial and error, and with the application of AA principles, had developed an understanding of the responsibilities that should reside with each, and how the various categories of trusted servants should relate to each other. He felt the principles and procedures that have been developed to ensure the effective operation of AA services should be recorded. And I listened to a tape of a talk that Bill made at the 1960 General Service Conference while he was in the process of writing the concepts that were very revealing to me, because I had been doing some thinking, and as I was trying to draw out the principles and then listen to the tape, I could see these were the principles that Bill was focusing on. He told the delegates that he was working on a series of essays for 12 concepts which would attempt to, and now I quote directly, codify the principal needs and relationships in our structure. He felt the spiritual principles in our 12 steps, and I think this is extremely significant because we look at these concepts as sort of a bunch of rules and regulations, but they aren't. They really contain spiritual principles. He felt the spiritual principles in our 12 steps had been extended to the 12 traditions and now needed to be extended to concepts for the conduct of our service affairs. Bill told the delegates that we should never freeze the functional, that is the details of how we work, but that our spiritual principles have been set, and he wished to describe the manner in which they applied to the service structure. He assured the conference that the concepts would not describe a new set of principles or suggest changes in the structure as it then existed. He said the manual describes, the conference manual describes the how of general services. The concepts would describe the why. And he told the conference that he was trying to organize them into perhaps 12 concepts. And I think Bill was captivated by the idea of 12 concepts because of the symmetry of the 12 steps, 12 traditions, and 12 concepts. But if you really read the essays and think about the principles, there are, as he described, a bunch of related principles, and there aren't really 12 of them. And as we go through them more quickly on some than others, I think that becomes more apparent. Bill, in that talk, stressed just a few of the ideas, and these, I think, are the basic spiritual principles with respect to AA services that are contained in the 12 concepts. He believed that final responsibility for AA services now resided with the groups themselves. And today, I think sometimes in general services, we hear a great deal of emphasis on the final authority of the groups, and that's fine. We all recognize the final authority of the groups, but with that authority goes responsibility. It's accompanied by responsibility. If the groups aren't paying attention, aren't perhaps contributing if they're able to, if they're not sending GSRs, they're not exercising their responsibility to participate in these affairs, they ought to be a little more cautious about their willingness to exercise their authority. While the fact of ultimate responsibility and the authority of the groups is unquestioned, Bill emphasized over and over again in this talk that it should be equally well understood that in order to meet our service obligations, in other words, in order to get anything done, responsibility and authority had to be delegated at all levels of service. In accordance with the democratic and spiritual principles of the traditions, the right of participation, this is another thought, the right of participation in reaching a decision had to be given to those who would be asked to implement the decision. In other words, if you ask somebody to do a job in service, you ought to give them the right of participation in making decisions about what that job should be. Further, and in keeping the spirit of AA, the minority should always be protected through the right of appeal. Now, I'll treat these in more detail, but those are the essential principles that Bill was trying to convey in writing the concepts. And I had sort of figured that out, but listening to the talk that Bill made while he was still writing them reaffirmed that idea. I've talked to people who were in almost daily contact with Bill while he was writing the concepts, and it was clear that Bill gave quite a lot of thought to just how they should be organized. He called them a bundle of related principles, and he took 12 because Bill was a salesman. The idea of 12 was more saleable. But they also make them a little less accessible for us who try to understand the principles of them. And I've tried to bundle the concepts a little bit. And the first 5 concepts cover the basic principles of ultimate responsibility on the part of the group, the absolute necessity for delegating decision-making authority, the right of participation, the rights of participation and of appeal, the recognition of the rights of the minority, and the reasons why they are necessary for the conduct of our service activity. Those are in the first 5 concepts. Concepts 6, 7, and 8 take those principles and apply them to the specific service structure of the General Service Conference structure in the United States and Canada. And groups over service structures overseas have had a little trouble with those concepts because they don't have the same legal setup with operating corporations and so forth, and they don't have quite the same structure. So I've just, when I talk to people from overseas, I say, well, don't worry about that too much. I mean, the principles are there. You can see the principles and how we applied them to our structure. You can apply the principles to your particular structure in the same way. In Concept 9, Bill, in order to round things out, took an article that he'd written sometime before for the Grapevine on leadership. That was kind of filler. It's a wonderful essay, but it was not really a part of what he was doing with the concepts, except that he wanted to get 12, and it kind of fit in. And I think the 10th concept is very significant because if you read it carefully and think about it, it's really just the other side of the coin. It's a restatement of the 3rd concept. And that was very much on Bill's mind. Concept 11 describes how the board and the office were operating, or how he thought it should be operating at that time. Some of those things are still true today, but there have been many changes. It's a very detailed description of service structures, not particularly relevant to AA overseas in terms of principles, and maybe not particularly relevant to people trying to apply the concepts to central office functions. Concept 1, I think we all understand, and I've tried to cover. In Concept 2, Bill makes it very clear that though the groups possessed final authority, they couldn't handle it as groups themselves. They couldn't discharge this responsibility or effectively exercise the authority that they have and without delegating decision-making authority to representatives who could speak and act for them. And that becomes the delegates to the General Service Conference. The delegation of authority by the groups to the conference is the first example and the principal example of the necessity to grant ample authority and responsibility to trusted servants. The concepts state, see, this is Bill's language now, that this principle of delegation must be implicit from the top to bottom of our active structure of service. And I think it must be implicit from the top to the bottom of any service structure. Now I like to get into examples. Today there's lots of examples in which delegates come to the conference well informed by their areas. They know how their areas feel, and then they vote contrary to the feelings of their areas. And that is perfectly in keeping and consistent and true to the spirit of the concepts. I was a delegate way back in 1976 when the question of a paperback big book came up. And my area thought it was a great idea, and I went to the conference prepared to vote for it. But I listened to lots of people, some of them from Ohio, who thought it would be the end of AA if we brought out a paperback big book. And I thought, not now. And I voted against it. And I went home and explained to the area why I voted against it, although they had voted for it, and I was never misunderstood and never criticized for that vote. Concept 3 discusses the right of decision. That's indispensable to delegated responsibility, whatever job we might have in AA. It applies to anyone offering to be of service in AA. But it's a principle that's often misunderstood and that frequently leads to controversy. And I think probably the vast majority of the people in this room have experienced the misunderstanding of the principle of the right of decision and the misunderstandings that can arise. But at the group level, we don't tell the coffee maker how to make the coffee. We assume they know that, and when we give them the job, and if they don't know how to make coffee, somebody will help them. But the group doesn't take a vote as to how the coffee maker makes the coffee. But we have a little difficulty following that principle as we go through these other jobs in service. Area assemblies and groups inform the delegate, as I talked about, but they don't instruct the delegate. The conference has authority, no question about their authority, over the General Service Board, the Grapevine and AAWS boards, and over the Grapevine office and GSO. And they can make specific recommendations and even decisions as to what we have to do. But the conference recognizes that implementing these decisions, these recommendations, and these questions of policy that they decide requires that they give us some authority to make decisions as to how these things should be done. In Bill's words, again, some traditional and practical principle has to be devised which at all levels, and I think this applies to central offices, will continuously balance the right relation between ultimate authority, and delegated responsibility. And he comes back to that in the 10th concepts. All of the concepts touch on this balancing of power, balancing of rights and responsibilities. They contain all these checks and balances all through the concepts. Now, I found it completely fascinating when I read the concepts about 30 years ago, the principle that each AA servant or service entity or committee or me as general manager or Ames as executive editor of the Grapevine is given the right to decide how they interpret the extent of their own authority to each particular problem or situation as it arises. When I read that, my hair almost stood on end. That's the most radical thing I ever saw. That means someone can decide whether they have authority to do something or not. That's crazy. But put it very simply, each person or entity or service entity can decide when they can make a decision or when they need to seek guidance or approval from the decision from their boss, whatever level of service they find their boss. Bill felt that this is really what we mean when we're talking about trusted servants. And if we trusted someone, in the tape, it's very interesting. Bill was, the whole tone is the typical Bill. You've all heard his tapes and talks, but he got almost strident at this point, and he practically shouted in the mic. He says, for God's sakes, if you trust somebody enough to give them the job, why the hell don't you trust them to get the job done? And he just about shouts that into the microphone, so you could see that Bill felt very strongly on that principle, probably from his own experiences through the years. Bill felt, and I also believe, that there's ample opportunity to rectify mistakes that might be made if authority is clearly exceeded, and to correct the situation or to replace the people who are consistently exceeding their authority. At least in my own experience, this concept has acquired very profound spiritual meaning and reflects and brings forward the principles of the 3rd and the 11th step into our service, and the 2nd and the 12th traditions. There's other examples, and I like to talk about the concepts in the way of examples of when someone takes authority, maybe exceeds their authority, when the person who is their boss doesn't like what they've done. And I'll again cite an example from my own experience. Way back in the 70s, you'll recall that Harper and Row brought out a book called Bill W., a biography of Bill, and it was not published by AA. The AAWS board at the time, and with all good faith and as a service, and what they felt was a service to the membership of AA, decided to sell the book from the General Service Office. The delegates didn't care for that idea, and they came to the conference and politely but firmly told the boards that they didn't think that this was such a good idea. They didn't accuse anyone of any sinister motives or of doing anything that they really shouldn't have done. They just said they didn't think it was a good idea. And the boards heard the conference and discontinued the practice of selling the book out of the office with no hard feelings on the part of the boards toward the conference or the conference towards the board, which in my mind is an example. Some people would say they should have gone to the conference first. Well, they decided they didn't need to. They'd make this decision. Conference didn't like the decision. They corrected the decision. And everything worked out pretty well. I also, when I first got involved in service, which was at the intergroup level, questioned the fourth concept, the right of participation. I thought that my dear friend and dearly beloved central office manager at the time participated way too much in meetings of the Central Service Committee, of which I was a member and then chairman, and even voted. And I thought that was completely out of hand. I thought we ought to leave him in the next room while we made these decisions as to what he should do to run the office. I'd been kind of a hard-charging insurance executive and board member. I've turned into a pussycat at GSO, as Susan and Vinny can tell you. I've changed completely. But I was a hard-driving executive, and the board's the boss. The board's the king. The Central Office Committee's the king. We don't need the participation of these people who are doing the jobs. They're working for us. But I was dead wrong. That will never work in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's completely and totally unspiritual to maintain the attitude that I had. And I learned that as I went along. I thought decisions should be left to those with superior authority. Experience in AA service led me to realize that AA has to be different, that we are an exceptionally democratic society. We're not just a democratic society, we are an exceptionally democratic society. And although we may have differing responsibilities in service as recovering alcoholics, we are all equals. We're all peers. None of us is superior to any one of the others as AA members. And that is a deep spiritual principle in our steps, in our 12th tradition. It runs through all of our principles, that no one is any higher authority than anyone else as an individual. The concept describes the fact that Grapevine executives and myself and the AA staff have voting rights at the conference. But really the concept, which is really the third incorporated in the third warranty, which were written before the concepts, goes far deeper than that. For example, the Grapevine board and the AAWS board have the right to nominate their own directors, subject to the approval of the General Service Board and the conference. The AA staff and the Grapevine management and non-trustee committee members and corporate directors attend and are given all the input they want at quarterly meetings of the General Service Board. The General Service Board tries not to do very much just locked off all by itself. They welcome the input and participation of all the rest of these people that are involved in service. those of you who have been delegates who came in January, were chairman of your committees, could see how open the process was at those January board meetings. It was made the subject of a warranty, and the idea that no one in AA service should have unqualified authority over any other is an application of the spirituality of the 12th tradition. And Bill put it best, as usual, when he says it really means, what it really means is that we of AA will not tolerate absolute human authority in any form. And that is why when we in service, including myself at times, get too bossy, it just doesn't work, because drunks don't tolerate human authority in any form that well. Now the last basic principle is the right of the minority, and that's a critical spiritual principle, and carries over the principles in the second tradition, the 12th tradition. And we have to be super democratic. We have a responsibility to the minority. The majority has a responsibility to the minority to be sure that the minority's voice is heard. And the minority has a responsibility to let us hear their voice. If you are really uncomfortable with what's going on, you have a responsibility to say so, not to just sit there. And we who are in the majority have a responsibility to listen to you very carefully. At the conference, I've co-chaired, 6 of them now. Those of you who've been delegates know that after a vote we ask if those on the losing side want to speak to their position, and they very frequently do. And everybody listens to them very carefully. If somebody who voted on the winning side has heard something that changes their minds, they get up and move for reconsideration of the previous vote. If that carries, then the discussion starts all over again. Here we go again, and it goes on, and then we vote again. It's a great safeguard of the fellowship. I remember when I was trustee, what seemed like a very simple question came up, and there were 129 hands went up, yay. And is there any opposed? One hand went up, and the chairman made a big mistake. He said, I don't want to mention her name, although she's dead. She was such a great lady. Would you like to speak to your minority position? And she said, you're damn tootin'. And she got to Mike Alexander, our non-alcoholic past chairman of the board, loves this story. She sort of treed the whole conference. She went to the mic and said, I can't understand how you can all be so stupid. And then she proved to us that we had been completely stupid. There was a vote for reconsideration, and the prior vote was reversed. And I find these moments at a conference tremendously moving and spiritual, when a conference can be so torn and so divided. But if we listen to each other long enough with minds that are open and without the necessity that we prevail on our position, the need to win, if we can get rid of that need to win, then something truly spiritual happens, and you can feel the conference come together on a vote. Those are the principles. Now, 6 through 8, lots of detail. The number 6 gives the right of decision and the authority the conference grants the General Service Board in matters of policy and finance. And I'll give an example of this, of how this has operated. In 1976, the Conference Finance Committee felt that we were making too much money on literature. That was a period when sales were going up 10, 15, 20% a year, and we were concerned that it would have an inhibiting effect on group contributions. So we came out with a recommendation, but we decided not to recommend that the board reduce the price of literature, because that would be interfering with the board's fiscal responsibility to the fellowship as a whole. We did not want to bind them. We knew that we were going to go home and that they would be left with the responsibility of maintaining the financial health of the General Service Office. So we recommended that the board consider reducing the price of literature, which bound them in no way, just asked them to think about doing it. But we recognize their responsibilities under the concepts with respect to the financial soundness of the office. And the board did exactly what we did. They considered it, and they did reduce the price of literature. But the conference did not take over the board's responsibilities in that example. 7 is something that our overseas friends never quite understand, the legal authority of the board and the traditional moral authority of the conference. And there are situations in which the board would almost have to refuse to comply with a recommendation of the conference, even if it were passed with better than 2/3 with what we define as substantial unanimity. Now, that has not really happened, but that safeguard pretty much has been in there since the beginning, and it's a sound safeguard. I know of no situation, what are we coming on, the 48th General Service Conference. I know of no situation through 47 General Service Conferences in which the General Service Board has knowingly and willingly refused to implement a recommendation of the conference passed with substantial unanimity. Concept 8 simply tells the General Service Board that you really can't run the grapevine and you can't run GSO. You've got to leave the day-to-day, week-to-week management of those offices to their corporate boards. And Bill talks about the kind of sad history. At one point, the General Service Board thought they would run GSO and they would not need what was then the equivalent of AAWS, and chaos ensued. The General Service Board doesn't meet frequently enough. It's too large. Trustees have too many other service responsibilities, and they can't focus on the type of business decisions that have to be made at the level of the Grapevine and AAWS Board. They control those decisions because they have the right to elect and throw out the directors of both those corporations. And if things are going too badly awry at either the Grapevine or the AAWS levels, they would have an absolute responsibility to do something about the board to get the situation turned around. So that takes you through 6 through 8. 9 is a essay on leadership, which I found very helpful in the last 6 years. I spent some evenings in the office and have folks in the archives dig out some of Bill's letters and read some of the angry, strident, nasty letters that were sent by drunks to the guy who had really given them back their lives. And it makes me feel a little less sorry for myself because the people that are writing me don't owe me that kind of a debt. Bill talks about exercising vision, but he also talks about that we have to be patient. And boy, patience is not my long suit, folks. I'll tell you that. Patience and tolerance in the face of criticism. The history's full of bitter and angry criticism against Bill. Through it all, Bill conducted himself with dignity, with kindness, often even tenderness, towards even his most bitter and angry and strident opponents. Bill always wanted to listen to criticism and opposition. Even when people were wholly wrong, he wanted to listen to them because he felt he might learn something, and they might be partially right. And even if they were wholly wrong, he felt he could learn from them in any case. And I've tried to learn from some of our strident critics. Some of them I felt the only thing I'm learning from this is how not to behave myself. but even that can be a helpful lesson. But Bill also recognized, and I think this is very important, and I've had to think about this with reference to my own actions at GSO, that there comes a time when there's no point in continuing the discourse, when the minority has been heard and reheard and reheard, and they seem to feel that if only you would understand what we were saying, you would change your mind. If you would listen to us and understand, you would change your mind. This has happened at conferences in some years. But the truth is the conference has listened, has understood what they were saying, and listened to it again and again and again over 3, maybe even 4 conferences. But the fact is they simply don't agree. They've heard, they understand, but the majority, the overwhelming majority, does not agree with that point of view. At that point, we have to be careful of the tyranny of the minority. When that time comes, we have to let go with love. Try to retain the friendship of our critics, and try to and then get on with the tasks that AA asks of us. I have a lot of responsibilities as the general manager. There comes a time when I have to kind of let go of the critics and get on with the things that I'm supposed to be doing to help you guys carry the message to the A's that are out there. And concept 10 I really find fascinating, because here Bill's gotten all the way up to 10 and he decides to go back to 3. In a sense, you can see he was obsessed with the need to delegate authority. And he again clarifies the distinction between ultimate and final authority and delegated, or what he calls operating authority. People need some decision-making authority in order to operate anything, and Bill was very concerned about it. And he details the necessity of endowing trusted servants with sufficient operating authority to match the specific responsibility. I'm increasingly impressed with how concerned Bill was about trusting our trusted servants and allowing them to do the job. I'll quote what I wrote to Germans. This concept suggests to me that each group of trusted servants should know who their boss is, and I know who my boss is, all of you. But the boss, whether it's the group, the area committee, the GSRs, the conference, the General Service Board, the corporate boards, AAWS and the Grapevine, or the general manager and the executive director of the Grapevine, should give sufficient authority to the people who were asking to do the job to get the job done. And Susan will probably throw that back in my face. And that's all right, Susan, I won't mind. Bill states in the first warranty, it sums up his thinking about this, and I believe this with all my heart, that long experience, now codified in these 12 concepts, suggests that we are unlikely to encounter problems of too much service authority. I think you central office managers may kind of like this. It's in the bill, the 12th concept, warranty 1. It is unlikely that we are to encounter problems of too much service authority. On the contrary, it appears that our difficulty will be how to maintain enough of it. He had very little fear that any individual or entity would accumulate too much power. And it's not going to be long before I move on. I don't think I would. I've never felt more powerless in my whole life as I have in this position. And I agree with Bill. I don't think we have too much to fear. You know, Bill described the concepts as his last service authority. Well, I'll touch on the 11th concept, as I say, just to describe this whole board and committee structure. And it's interesting, but it's not terribly relevant to the central office situation. The 12th concept is really an essay on the warranties. The warranties were written before the conference, the concepts. They were written in the conference charter, and they are the great spiritual bill of rights of the service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I get somebody who wants to go into service, and they get the manual, they're going to read the manual. So the first thing I want you to read is the essay on the warranties contained in the 12th concept. But it stands alone as a magnificent essay on the spiritual principles and the practical application the warranties of our general service structure, and they apply to all service activities, in my opinion. The warranties can apply just as well to a central office structure, a foreign GSO structure, as to our own general service structure. Bill said that concepts were going to be his final service task, but they were not quite. In the late 60s, as AA began to grow around the world, Bill had one more initiative, and that was the World Service meeting. The first one was held in 1969. Susan's been to several of them. She even met her late husband at one of the World Service meetings. Wonderful, wonderful man. I think these intergroup seminars are my second favorite service events, this World Service meeting being perhaps my first, because you see these people coming from all over the world, different languages, different cultures, different political systems, different religions. First we identify as drunks, and that process doesn't take too long. We understand each other because we're all drunks. And then we start to identify in AA terms. The problems we face, the issues we're dealing with, there's a lot in common from country to country on a broad basis. The details may be different, but the issues of how we run ourselves, how we get these service things done, are common to just about every AA situation I've found around the world. And I've done quite a bit of it in the last few years, and I've found that the principles and the concepts and the warranties have been invaluable to the countries that have tried to make use of them. Countries that have ignored them have had some problems and are continuing to have problems. But there's countries that have understood them and embraced them, and they're just doing great. I have paid no attention to the time because I'm so interested in what I'm talking about. But I will close now, but I'll just read the conclusion of my German article in English. The third and the 11th step, this is George now, telling me to search for knowledge of God's will for me as a recovering alcoholic. The second and the 9th traditions tell us that for AA there's only one authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience, and the trusted servants are directly responsible to those they serve. These and our other spiritual principles tell us that in our group and service efforts, we are collectively seeking knowledge of God's will for us, just as we do individually in the 3rd and the 11th step. The concepts describe beautifully how these principles apply in service, completing the triangle of recovery, unity, and service, and creating a spiritual unity in all that we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. With this work completed, Bill felt that AA was safe in the hearts of its members and in the conscience of its servants. Thanks very much.